What? How the hell did you do that?
Come on.
Oh!
Hello everyone, I'm back. It's been a year. In this past year, I have done absolutely nothing useful for this channel. So I thought to myself, it's time to get back in the game and start making some good, decent tutorials. This one hopefully will be the first of many, this one being Teleportation. The effect has recently been made by Riot, but the way they did it, I found, was very expensive. You had to pay for the software, the stock footage, and the sound, and by the end of it became ridiculous. So I thought to myself, why not try and recreate this effect completely for free? So that's what I did. I used Blender to create it, and I got free sound effects. Other things I'd like to say is, first of all, I'm going to try and upload videos once a week from now on. Hopefully this will turn out better, and hopefully I won't have only less than 100 people watching my videos at a time. In a week. In a month. Okay, let's just continue on to the tutorial. Thank you. Okay, so now that we're in Blender, we can start video editing, because that's the most important part. You need to do the video editing before you do the actual special effects, because it just makes your job a lot easier. We don't need anything in this scene, so if you want to, you can delete, even though it doesn't make any difference. Okay, make sure the resolution is the same as your video, and that this is set up to 100%. By default it's set to 50. Frame rate should be the same as your video as well, otherwise your audio and video won't be in sync. If they're not in sync, the frame rate is wrong. I want to select a particular output for my video, which for me is here. Notice I have 3 folders, one for the smoke stock footage that we're going to be creating, one for the final render, and one for compositing. But I'm going to save the original, the edited version just here, beside those 3 folders. I don't want to save the entire video out as PNG raw frames because there is any point. You can just change it to a video file. Choose whatever you want, it doesn't make any difference. AVI gives the best, but I'm going to choose MPEG because it's fast and the quality of my camera is useless, so it doesn't make any difference. Audio codec should be AAC. I found that that's the best. Don't choose MP3, choose AAC, that's the best. Now go up here and go down to video editing. We can finally start video editing. I'm going to press Shift A and add the movie that I want to bring in. As you can see, there are 2 strips now, one being audio, the green one, and one being video, the blue one. I'm going to select the audio first, scroll down in this tab here, turn on draw waveform. It's faster and easier to see what you're doing. If you scroll it in and out, you can zoom in on your footage, but the problem is it's not high enough on the vertical axis, so just hold down Control and use the middle mouse button and just move, and then just hold down the middle mouse button on its own and you can move around just like in the 3D mode. Next, if you look, you can see that the entire video is 990 frames long, so I'm going to set the end frame to 990. Then just press Alt A to play, or you can use these buttons here. I want to start my video on frame 125. What frame you want to start on depends on you. But I'm going to select both by right-clicking on one, holding down Shift and right-clicking on the other. Then I'll press K. What this does is it separates the 2 strips into 4. Just splits them. We do not need these 2 strips at the start, so we can delete them.
I'm going to teleport to that door.
Go to the point where you want your actor to disappear. Select both strips again, and press K. Now, you want a couple of frames where your actor is not visible in this scene. That's why I got him to duck down. I'm going to select both strips again and press K. Then I use the arrow keys to move on 3 more strips, 3 more frames. Select both strips again and press K. We do not need these 2 strips, so we can delete those. Okay, so go to the frame where your actor comes back into the scene, which for me is here. I'm going to select both strips again, press K. And we don't need these 2 strips either.
What?
And the rest of the video is fine for me, except for the very end, where I don't need all of this. And there we go. So the entire video will change now in a sec. Just move all the frames back to the start so that they fit in well. There we go. If I go to the last frame, you can see it's 554 frames long, but I'm just going to set it at 550. You don't need those extra 4 frames. Anyway, so now you can go through the entire video, and it works fine. So to save the entire thing out as an actual video, just press Control F12 and it'll render out. This should be fast considering it's not actually rendering anything if you did it right, and it's only compiling it all into a video. Okay, now with a new scene we can start creating the smoke stock footage. So I'm going to go into front view, delete the cube because we don't need it, and I'm going to add in an icosphere. This is going to be the flow object for our smoke. We need a flow object and a domain object. However, I'm going to show you something. If you've messed with smoke simulation before, you probably know this already. Quick smoke. It only works if you have the flow object selected. This is now our domain object. And if you press Alt-A, it creates smoke. You can render this out and have a look at it yourself. There you go. Lovely looking smoke. Okay, so before I get started, I like to get my scene set up properly. I want to go to the world settings, background, set that to pitch black. Then go to the render settings. Under layer, turn off sky. That means when you render it again, it's see-through. Okay. Now that we have that, then we can start working on the actual simulation. With the domain object selected, I'm going to press Alt-G, Alt-S, and there we go. Actually, what I might do is just screencast keys. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to go to orthographic view. Wow, that's a bit too big. That's alright. Press S to scale, and I'm going to scale it up 3. So S3. Now just go back to the start, and I'll refresh. There we go. Now the first thing is we don't want the smoke to rise. There's no point in making it rise. So I'm going to select the flow object first. Going to go to physics settings, which is this panel here. And I'm going to change the temperature difference. Make that 0. I'm going to do the same thing with the flow object. Make the temperature difference 0. Everything else can stay the same for the moment. As you can see, it doesn't move. Next thing we want to do is add a particle system. Because the thing about a particle system is that we are able to control every single part of the simulation a lot better. I prefer to use a particle system, though using the domain object works very well as well. But it just creates a constant stream of smoke, which we don't want. We want the smoke to start and end in a very short time, and then eventually fade away. So I'm going to set the start frame to 2, the end frame to 2, so that all the particles come out at the same time. Lifetime, way too high, set that to 3 or 4. Now if we press play, as you can see, the particles kind of build up on the surface. It's not really what we want. Simple way to solve that is just lower the amount of particles by clicking on it and typing in a value. The amount of faces on this icosphere is 326. So I'll type that in. Just play it again. And now bring it back to 1,000. Should work. And it doesn't. Brilliant. Okay, just set the source to particle system. Select that particle system we just made. It's really odd. One sec. Okay, so just simply now it works fine. Just lower it down to a small number and bring it back up after the smoke simulation. After you set it as the smoke flow object, flow source. I'm going to turn on initial velocity, and that just creates a bit of velocity in the direction the smoke started. However, we want this to go outwards, so we're going to turn off physics for the particles. Scroll down to field weights and just drag gravity to 0. Let's look at that again. Particles only go outwards. Okay. Under velocity, change that to a higher number. I use 5. And now you can really see it starts to take place. It's already pretty good. It looks okay. If you don't find it's big enough, you can always change the size afterwards. But just not in edit mode. Don't do it in edit mode. Okay. So, next thing we want to do is change settings in the domain object again. I'm going to bring the vorticity up to 4. It helps sometimes, depending on what effect you want. And what it does is it adds swirls. It's a nice effect, but the resolution is not high enough for you to see properly. So we'll turn that up, bring it up to 50. If you turn on smoke adapted domain, it makes the entire simulation run faster. So that's looking nice. It's looking very cool. Okay, next thing I want to turn on is dissolve. To show you what it does, it dissolves. That's simple. I'm going to set it to a higher setting though. Not too high, 15. There, it's better. Okay. Now that we have that done, we can add a force field. Force field I'm going to add is just a normal force. However, I don't want this to have any strength until after the particles have gone. So strength of 1 is fine. Just wait until the particles have disappeared. So there is fine. I'm going to go back 1 frame. While my mouse is hovering, while the cursor is hovering over the strength, I'm going to press I. Then move over 1 more frame. Press I again. I'm going to change the strength to be something high enough, 50. And what that'll do is that at this frame, the strength is still 1. Next frame, it's 50. This is good to extend the smoke a bit. You can change it the way you want, then afterwards decide when it's gone too far and just bring that to even a minus value and it'll suck it all in. Though it doesn't work that well for implosions, annoyingly enough. Especially with smoke. It's good with particles, but not smoke. So I like there. I'm going to bring it back a little bit more. And I'm going to change that value. Well, I'm going to set a keyframe and move another frame, and I'm going to change that to a minus value of minus 50. Why not? This is really the point where you can start to be as creative as you want. There we go. I'm going to turn down the dissolve. I don't want it to be that long. 10 frames. I'd say this is still too long. There you go. And I'm going to mess around with it a bit more, but that's really the basics of it. If you want, you can change it to a fire, but it wasn't done in the original tutorial. Suit yourself. Create a nice, cool Back to the Future effect if you want. Suit yourself. Okay. I'm done, pretty much. Create a nice, cool effect. One last thing I'd like to show you is that if you go to textures, you can add one for the particles. Set it to clouds. Going to turn up the depth a bit. Go to colors and just adjust the contrast a little bit to make it a bit stronger. And set the size to something smaller, 0.15. Even a little bit more small. 0.1. There. Scroll down. under influence, turn off time and turn on velocity. And what that does is it adds more variation. Very useful. In my final version that I put on my channel, I also used a vortex. I recommend that you change the physics from a plane to a point, because it creates nicer effects. Show you quickly. Turn up the strength to 500. Okay, a bit too strong. It's going to need some keyframing as well. Damn. Wrong. There we go. Just going to scale that up so we can see a bit better. Okay. Set that to 30. Probably even lower than that. Just to see what that grades. Yeah, it creates a nice effect. You can make it stronger if you want. Plane is just very hard to deal with. It only works on one axis. It's annoying. And though you might think only working on one axis would be good for this, it's just hard to work with. Even set this up a bit higher. That's nice. Gonna turn this up a bit more. That's fine, I don't think it's gonna get much better than that. Okay. So once you have the entire thing figured out, just select the domain again. I'm going to turn up the divisions. This will create a nicer looking effect. However, it's tough on the system, tough on your machine. I'm going to bring it up to 300, and I'm also going to turn on smoke high resolution. I'm going to bring the divisions up to 2 or 3, doesn't matter. Yeah, bring it up to 3. Once you've done that, you need to save as, and just save it wherever you want. In fact, I might as well put it in tutorials, wherever that went. There, I'll put it there. Okay, now there's actually a path to bake the smoke cache, which we need to. Okay, so you need to click bake, but before we do that, we need to set an end frame, because we don't need to bake the entire scene, the entire amount of time. So I'm just going to turn this off for a second. Bring the resolution down. See exactly how long it is. Frame 22. So I'll make that the last frame. Now I can bring this back up to 300. Turn on high resolution. Set to 300 as well. Oh, sorry, 22. And just click bake. It'll take a while, so I'll be back when it's finished. Okay, it's finished, and now you can play through the video. And see how it looks. I'm pretty happy with that effect. Looks better than the first time anyway. I turned down the resolution because Blender was crashing. Yeah, but anyway. Okay, I'm gonna press Shift S with cursor bracket selected, just to be nice and organized. And now we can work on lighting. We don't need that. I press 1 on the number pad, Control Alt number pad 0. Turn this back on. Okay. Now we can add our first light. I'm only going to add in sun lights because that's really all we need. Gonna move it up. Now the way it should work is just make it point downwards, and apparently it should be 45 degrees, a 45-degree angle from the perpendicular line of the 45-degree angle from the camera. Okay, just 90 degrees from the camera. Which, that seems about right. I'm going to turn up the brightness, change the energy to, let's say 4. I'm going to duplicate that, bring it down here, rotate it in the opposite direction. Turn that energy down to 0.5 or something like that. So that gives us a backlight. That seems good. Next we can work on all the textures and things like that. So first thing I want to do is go to the particle system and under render change it from halo to none. Then underneath that go to display and change it to point so we can still see it in the viewport. But it won't render out as halos. Next thing, go to materials. We don't want to select the smoke domain material, new material. Call it flow. Okay. Make that surface, transparency. Turn the alpha and the specular down to 0. And that should work fine. Press Alt A. Bring it in a bit. Render. Okay. Now, how did I solve this problem again? Okay, I just created a new material, turned on transparency, and set the elephant specular back to 0, and it worked. Whatever. Okay, as you can see, not all of the smoke stays in the footage, so going to have to do a bit of manual editing. Okay, so I went to the camera view, press G, and to make sure that it moves along the right axis, just press the middle mouse button and move back as far as we need, which here should be fine. Okay. And that seems fine. Okay. everything's working correctly. So we can just like to go to the very end. Check one last thing. Yeah, okay. I'm going to set the location I want the entire video to save to, the stock footage, which removes that smoke folder I made earlier. As you can see, there's a new folder called blend cache underscore smoke, since the blend file was called smoke, and that's the smoke cache that we baked. Go figure. This is where I want to export the video, and there we go. Everything's ready to export. If you want, you can make the camera a bit brighter, suit yourself, but I'd say it's about fine. We can always change it afterwards. However, if you do have a black background and turn it into a video instead, then it is recommended to have quite high contrast. Make the smoke quite bright, brighter than it needs to be. Okay. Control F12. Yeah. I'll just leave that do its thing and come back to you afterwards. Okay, so now we can do the compositing, which is basically all the extra stuff to actually get the stock footage on top of the video and make it look nice. We don't need any of this stuff, so once again you can delete it. Frame rate should be 29.97, resolution same as the video, and at 100%. And if your stock footage wasn't at 100%, you may have some problems. I'm going to, this time, put everything into the composite folder, just to be nice and neat. Okay, so then I'm going to come down here. I'm going to go to the node editor, click on the render tab, same as the render tab over here. Turn on use nodes, backdrop, and auto render. Render layers node here we don't need because we don't have anything in our scene 3D wise, so I can delete that. Press Shift A to add a new node. We're going to add an image input node. I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it because we need two of them. Open. First one is going to be the video that we edited. Second one is going to be the smoke. Okay. Now that we have done, I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go to Output and add a viewer node. This means that we can see what's going on in the background if I show you. We have something to show you in the background. Okay. Press V, and this moves the image in the background back. Alt V to move it back in. Okay. So, we have a couple of problems. First thing, this is on its last frame. So I'm going to change the offset to 0. Frames, 550 frames, because that was the length of the film. Which means I'm also going to change the end frame to 550. Second thing, there's nothing here, and it's a single image. So just change that to an image sequence. There were 22 frames in mine, and the offset you don't mess with. It's very rare you mess with the offset. Okay. I'm going to drag this over here. Just move in a couple of frames and I'll show you exactly what it does. I'm going to press F12 and you get the smoke. However, in the viewport you only get the video. That's because this is hooked up to the viewer node and the image is hooked up to the composite node. You won't get the image in the background unless you have backdrop and auto render turned on. Next, I'm going to press Shift A, go to color, and add an alpha overnode, and add it on top of the image. Then, going to connect the smoke to that image. Now, as you can see, there's something going on around the edges. It's all white. Just click Convert Pre-Multiplied, and that'll solve that problem. Very simple. You can stick it back into the composite now. Press F12, and you get what you expect. Okay. Now the next thing is that the smoke doesn't start at the right frame. You want it to start just a couple of frames before he disappears. So go to that frame where he disappeared. I'm just going to go back another 2 frames, and that's frame 84. Might even go back one more than that. Set the start frame to be whatever it is you want, but for me that'll be 83. Turn on auto refresh for both of these. It helps. Okay. Now I'm going to mess with the factor a little bit, because at the end we had a bit of an artifact here. You might not be able to see it very clearly. And it's not really noticeable, but I prefer to not be able to see it at all. So I'm going to change this to 0. And with my cursor on top of it, I'm going to press I. Then going to go back 1 frame. And this is the point where I'm going to change this smoke to be exactly the value I want, which for me, having tested it already, is 0.7. This might be lower or higher for you, depending on how thick you want the smoke to be. It adjusts the opacity. Now the other thing is that the smoke is way too bright. It doesn't look very realistic. So I'm going to press Shift A, going to go to Hue, Saturation, Value underneath color. I'm going to add that on top of the image. And I'm going to bring down the value. Now normally the hue and saturation, well the hue anyway, changes the color, and the saturation changes the grayscale to make it more or less colorful, pretty much saturated. If you want to change the color of your smoke, it's very simple. Go to color balance, add that on top, and use this wheel here, change it to whatever color you want. You have pink smoke, red smoke, and then you can mess with these values as well. These change different lighting effects. But I want mine to be gray, so yeah. Now the next thing is that this clearly is not in the right space. It's not where you want it to be. So I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go down to Distort, and I'm going to add in a Translate node. Then I'm just going to move it across on the X axis. Hold on Control, it goes faster. right to the point where he disappears. Okay, that's a bit better. However, I also wanted to scale so that it stretches a bit upwards. That's my personal preference. If you want, you can leave it as a circle. And what you can do is use a transform node instead of a translate, and that uses angle and scale as well. But I only want to scale it along one particular axis. So, I'm going to go to distort and use the scale node. Pretty simple. And I'm only going to scale along the y-axis. Okay, that's way too much. Down. Okay. And that works fine. Okay. So now that that's done, we need to do the same thing over here when he reappears. So I'm going to select that, hold down Shift, select all of these, and I'm going to select the top one. Oops. And press Shift D to duplicate. Okay. So I'm going to start this 3 frames after the other one. I'm going to change the point where it actually comes into scene. But first I'm going to move this over here and connect it to the viewer node. So we can see it a bit better. And just move the smoke over to where it needs to be. That looks about fine. However, I'm going to change the scale. Bring it down to 0.8. Bring that down to 0.3 or whatever. And move this back into position. Okay. So that looks good. But as you can see, if you look closely, I can't really see there. The smoke goes over the window, which is not what we want. That's why, first of all, I'm going to save this, just in case. Save it in Composite. I'm going to call it Composite. Okay. I'm going to go to the movie clip editor and import the movie. Okay, I'm going to change this from tracking to mask. We'll mess with tracking in the next tutorial. Since the video doesn't move, we don't need to animate our track. As you can see, the entire video is a little bit of distortion though. Well, lens distortion. So this should be straight, but it's not since it's a camera. So hold down Control and click to add your mask. I'm going to add in all four corners first. Press Alt-C to join it back together again. And if you just hold down Control and click while near mask, it saves it, well, it creates a point on that mask layer. Very useful. Gonna move that into a better position. Okay, that looks good. Then I'm gonna press Shift A and add a square. Press G to move it, and use it for the second window. Very straightforward. See you when it's done. There we go. And that looks fine. So I'm just going to call this window, and I'm going to go back to the node editor. Just save it quickly. Then I'm going to press Shift A to add a mask. And I want that mask, so I'm going to go to Input. There we go, mask. Turn on anti-alias, makes it better. There's no point having motion blur, you don't need it. Okay. Now the thing is, where are you going to add this? And I found the best place to add it is in the alpha over. That way comes out the other side. Now the problem is this is now 100% again. It's not it doesn't have a factor of 0.7. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to color, hue saturation value, and I'm going to turn the value down to 0.7. There we go. And that's all the node editing we really need to do. If you want, you can add in some extra things. Motion blur, though, it's really not needed with smoke since it's already kind of blurry. It's not very sharp. So last thing we need to do is just make sure this is connected up properly. And everything else should be fine. Yep. So just press Control F12. Okay, and now we're ready for the last part. The last part will be the camera shake, which if you watch the tutorial made by Riot, you can see that indeed there is camera shake in it, and they show you how to do it through After Effects. You can do this in Blender. You can't do it automatically, you need to do it manually, animating it by hand. But you can do it if you want. What you can do is add in a camera, import the video as a plane, and just move it around in the 3D view. Or you can do it straight in the node editor, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to change the resolution to be 720. And the reason I want to do this is because this means that the quality of my camera looks higher than it actually is. Because it's that bad. Since this was recorded at 1080 anyway, making it 720 means that you don't lose any of your quality in terms of looking at it in 1080, because you won't be able to. You'll only be able to see in 720. Yeah, I'd say I probably messed that up, but just stick with it, okay? So I'm going to save in camera shake. Wait, wrong place. Tutorial. Yeah, I'm going to put in final render, since this is the final render. Once we're done this, we're done. Okay, so first of all, I'm not going to save it as a PNG because there's no point. We're not rendering anything. Once again, I'm going to save it out as MPEG. Same as before. Nothing changes. I'm not going to make it... Yeah, I'm not going to make it AAC yet. Well, actually, it can. No, there's no point. We're not going to have any audio. So, if you want, you can even save it as a PNG, actually. There's no point, because we will need to bring it back into the video editor afterwards. Anyway, I'm going to go into the node editor. I'm going to press Shift-A. Alright, go to Renders, turn on Use Nodes, Auto-Render, Backdrop. Okay, I'm going to press Shift-A, Input, Image, and bring in the movie that you just saved. Well, the images. It's in Composite. Select the first frame. Change it to Image Sequence. 550 frames long. Okay. We are actually going to need this, unless you have a 720p unless you have a 720p picture, you will need the render layer. So just add a camera, Control Alt numpad 0, and if this is right, it should be fine. I'm going to bring it back into Node Editor, turn on Auto Refresh, and I'm going to simply add a mix node and add a viewer node. There we go. Click on that to render it out. Now we can see the entire video properly. And the only reason I did this even when you composite it, when you render it out at the end, it will be 720. But for our purpose, we'll be able to see it actual 720 in the screen using the mix node. Yeah, and not 1080 p from the actual video. It just doesn't work like that. So whatever. Okay, now what we're going to use is the transform node, and we're going to do everything with this. Now the video, if you want to get it 720 immediately, you just hit the you just say divided by 3, so //3, if that'll work. 1 divided by 3, and then times 2, which, there you go. 1 divided by 3 times 2, and that is the 720p. And your video is back to normal. However, one thing I want to do is make actors not see that I didn't look at him the entire time and that I moved a little bit while I was cutting through. So, first thing, going to add I'm going to add a keyframe for each of these sliders, and if you want you can add one for angle as well, but I'm not going to be turning the camera at all. It's not going to be rotating. However, it will be more realistic if you do that, but there's no point. Next thing, I'm going to go to the frame where my actor is jumping, which is here. I'm going to bring this back to 1. You can make that 1.1. And I'm going to move it over on the x-axis. Just make sure you don't hit the edge where it's black. And I'm gonna bring this down a little bit. Yeah. Just to add some variety. And once he's back down, zoom into 1.2. I'm going to press I on everything to add a keyframe one time. Actually, I'm going to bring this down even more. And for the most part, no one will notice that I moved at all. Which means now we can go back to being to seeing me. and so on. So just go through the entire video and see what you can do, and at the end you should have some okay movements that are believable. Now, at one point my character bumps into the door, and the only thing I did to make that look realistic is I zoomed in on my actor at the start. I move over, see my awkward self there. Just move to the point I want. So it adds a bit of zooming in, and then I go to the frame where my actor is going to bump into the door. Don't do that. I had to add a keyframe. And that just helps sell the effect so much more. In fact, there. And then it's fast enough where he bumps into the door. And then by the time it gets to frame 500, I'll have zoomed out again. And that's the end of the video, really. Okay, so once again, press Ctrl F12 to render it out. And we get going for the last little part. We are going to finally get on to finishing up the video. So, first thing I'm going to do is change this to 720. Since our video is now 720, frames 29.97, output. Oh, oops. I'm going to change this to MPEG, coding, MPEG 4. This time we will use AAC because there will be sound. I'm going to go to the, up here, video editing, Shift A, add the movie that we just created. .551 frames, whatever. It's not, one frame is not going to make any difference. And I don't even know why it rendered out an extra frame. Whatever. Okay. Yes, we want the original video as well that we edited. And we don't need the actual video. We just need the sound. Make that 550 frames long. Just a little side effect of having video is that it might not have exactly the same amount of frames as the original raw frames, and it doesn't make any sense, but just yeah. Anyway, they line up perfectly, so it doesn't matter. And I'm still going to keep it at 550 because it's a 24th of a, it's a 30th of a frame. Of a second. Sorry. 30th of a second. So no one will notice. And even if there was an entire 10 frames off, people wouldn't notice. Now, the last thing we need is some sort of sound for when he goes through the window. I got this from the Final Cut King Whoosh pack, and it's actually a very good sound for this effect. I'm going to press Shift A, add sound. I want to add swoosh 1. Okay. Going to scroll down, turn on draw waveform, and move that back a couple of frames. Yeah, that's good. The other thing I want to do, turn down the volume to something lower. Oh, yeah. For some reason, if you turn down the volume... What? No, that shouldn't happen. Yeah, there we go. That's fine. And if you want, you can turn on the volume, turn the volume up on this as well. I'm not going to. I'm just cool that way. Yes, that works fine. And I also want to turn down the pitch. This would make more sense if it changed the length, because if you turn down the pitch of something, normally it changes the length. I'm going to make it 0.4 as well. And as you can see, that okay, that's a bit too low. 0.7. Yeah, that sounds better. Just move it another 2 frames back. And that works pretty well, doesn't it?
What?
Okay, so now all you need to do is render the video out and you're pretty much done. Just want to go back for 1 second to make sure. I'm going to save it as final render. And there we go. Okay. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm going to put this new version at the end of this video so you can watch it. And I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. It was a long one. I didn't expect it to be as long as it was. But anyway, it's finished now. So thank you. Goodbye.
I'm gonna teleport through that door.
What?
Tell you!
How the hell did you do